Awesome. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Joan Benziger Auditorium. My name is Ryan Brown, English Department Chair here at Woodson High School. Before we begin, I just wanted to thank a couple people who, without their efforts today, would not be possible. First, our Assistant Principal, Kathy Martin, for her oversight of today's event. Our theater teacher, Mrs. Hobson, for providing the technical support and setup. Our TV teacher, Mr. Dixon, for allowing us to use his production crew and taping today's event. I'd also like to thank our 10th grade English and history teachers for the respectful portrayal of the Holocaust, and not only that, but Elie Wiesel's night in your English classes. I'd also like to thank our very own Mrs. Fogelstein, who without her efforts, today's presentation would not be possible. And of course, I'd like to thank our distinguished guest, Ms. Weiss, for accepting our invitation to speak to the sophomore class. Too often, words in textbooks become mere words on a page. They just detail events that sometimes seem far removed from our daily lives. Too often, we become detached from the stories told in our text because the events of the past are complex. They're so complex that printed words cannot truly capture their significance. Too often, for those who have not experienced history, sometimes it seems far remote from our own because we lack a tangible link to the past. Today, we have a personal connection to the past. WT Woodson is honored to host Miss Irene Weiss, a local survivor of Auschwitz with personal ties to our Cavalier community. Hailing from a Hungarian-speaking part of Eastern Europe, which is now part of the Ukraine, Miss Weiss arrived in the United States in 1947 at the age of 16. In 1949, she married her husband, Martin Weiss, in New York City, before moving to Northern Virginia in 1953, where she raised 3 children who went on to wear the Woodson blue and white. One of them is here today as well. There you go. All right, Woodson, give it up. Receiving a BA in English from American University, she worked as an English as second language teacher for many years in Fairfax County Public Schools. During the early part of her life, Miss Weiss was a tragic participant in the Holocaust and experienced firsthand the dark depths of humanity. A prominent speaker on the war era, she informs the public of the past through her presentations at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, as well as local high schools and colleges, a message you, our future generation, need to hear and learn from. As a renowned witness to history, she was the keynote speaker at last year's International Holocaust Remembrance Day and was interviewed about her experiences by the CBS Morning Show. Now, she's here to share with you her first-person account on this tragic time. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to introduce to you Miss Irene Weiss.
Okay, so I will begin. In 1939, Hitler started World War II by invading Poland. Prior to that, his armies had already seized control of Czechoslovakia and Austria. Over the next several years, Nazi Germany occupied most of Europe, including Holland, Belgium, Greece, and France, and launched an invasion of the Soviet Union. In each of these occupied lands, the Germans quickly acted upon ideas they had worked out years before with the enactment of the Nuremberg laws. The idea was this: human beings are divided by race. There are superior races, namely the Germans and other so-called Aryan peoples, and inferior races such as the Slavs, Poles, Russians, and still others who are not quite human at all, such as the Jews and the Roma. By 1944, most of the Jews of Europe had been rounded up, stripped of their possessions, shipped to concentration camps, and murdered. However, one large Jewish population remained intact: 500,000 Jews of Hungary. At that time, I was living in a small town in Hungary with my parents, 5 siblings, and a large extended family. Life had begun to change for us in 1939 when Hungary joined the alliance with Germany and began to institute its own Nuremberg laws against the Jews. Jews lost their businesses, their professions, their civil rights. Jewish men were conscripted into labor brigades and sent to the front lines. Many did not return. Jewish children were expelled from Hungarian schools and universities. Jews who had lived there for generations had to prove their citizenship to prevent being deported. My father's lumber business was confiscated and given to a non-Jew. I no longer could go to school, and we had to wear a Jewish star. The local Hungarian Nazis were free to abuse and humiliate Jews, while the police stood by and watched. When Hungary saw that Germany was losing the war, they attempted to pull out of the alliance. Germany then invaded Hungary. Now the Germans were in charge and began to implement their ultimate plan for the Hungarian Jews, their final solution. We had never heard of Auschwitz. We had heard rumors of mass shootings of Jews in Poland by the Nazis, but we dismissed the stories as too outrageous to be believed. In early 1944, the Germans announced in our town that we had 24 hours to pack, take one suitcase each, and assemble at the town hall. We had no idea what would happen to us. My mother began baking bread and cooking food so that we would have some food wherever we were going. The next morning, a delegation of the mayor, police chief, and my school principal knocked on our door. They demanded that we hand them over our valuables. My father gave them some. We closed the gate behind us so that our dog wouldn't follow us and left our house. Along with about 100 other Jewish people in our town, my family was taken to an abandoned brick factory some miles away. There we joined thousands of Jewish families from neighboring towns. My family of eight grabbed some floor space inside the factory. We were kept there for almost a month in overcrowded conditions. Our food supply from home was gone, and we became dependent on soup rations. The men were frequently dragged out for questioning and beating. The Germans demanded our valuables again. One day, there was an announcement: all girls under 16 must have their heads shaved or their fathers would be beaten. So I ran to surrender my hair and to protect my father. My mother gave me a kerchief to cover my newly shorn head, and now I looked like an Orthodox married woman. In the middle of May, a train arrived on the tracks alongside the brick factory. It was a freight train with many boxcars. My family gathered our few belongings and joined the multitude heading for the boxcars. No one told us our destination, but again we feared it would be Poland. Flanked by guards, my family struggled to keep together. The 3 older children held on to the younger ones. Our parents carried our suitcases. We all managed to get into the same boxcar, squashed in with about 80 to 100 people. For the sake of modesty, men moved to one side and women to the other side of the boxcar. A guard slammed the door shut and bolted it from the outside. Inside it was dark. A small slit in the top corner allowed some light. Hours later, the train began to move. Inside, it was totally silent. Everyone was very frightened. It was almost impossible to see in the darkness, and the sole source of light was that small slit in the corner. There was a bucket for the toilet in the middle of the car. Hours passed, a night and a day. The bucket filled up. Peering out the slit, my father confirmed everyone's worst fear. The train was crossing into Poland. People were hungry and thirsty, and even small children, my very young brothers, knew not to ask for food or water. By now, we were expecting the train to stop somewhere in a forest where we would be met by a firing squad. Finally, the train stopped. "We are at some kind of camp," my father announced. "There are barracks here and prisoners in uniform This must be a work camp. We were relieved. The rumors had been wrong. We were not going to be shot in the forests of Poland. The doors opened, and air rushed in, and light. Out, out. They were screaming. There were dogs, SS men with guns, prisoners in striped uniforms, more shouting, "Leave everything behind." My mother quickly unpacked extra clothing and told us to put on more layers. My head had already been covered with a kerchief, and I pulled on an oversized winter coat. I jumped out of the boxcar onto the platform, and about 2,000 other people did the same. My family reached for each other, urgently trying to stay together in the swarm of people, the noise, and the confusion. As soon as we were out of the train, prisoners wearing striped uniforms jumped into the cars and dumped out all our belongings and possessions onto the platform, and were piling it into waiting trucks. A German guard barked, men to one side and women and children to the other. In an instant, my father and 16-year-old brother were swallowed into a huge crowd of men off to one side. I had no idea that I would never see them again. My mother, sisters, younger brothers, and I were in another enormous column of women and young children. A chimney was visible in the distance. Flames and smoke billowed from it. The column edged forward. Suddenly, my family was at the front of the column. Blocking our way were about a dozen armed German SS. One held a small stick. The SS motioned my sister Serena, who was 17, to the left. She joined other young women. At the same moment, the SS motioned my mother and two little brothers to the right. They disappeared from view. Only my younger sister and I remained. A baton came down between us. My sister was sent to the right. The German looked at me and hesitated for an instant. Although I was only 13 years old and should have been selected with the children, my kerchief on my head and my big coat disguised my true age, made me look older. He motioned me towards the direction of the young adults and turned his attention to the women and children lined up behind me. I hesitated, trying to see whether my sister had caught up to my mom. It was not possible to see what happened to her. I learned after the war that this very moment was captured in a picture taken by the SS, which is now part of the permanent exhibit at the Holocaust Museum. The SS motioned me to get going. I ran in the direction of my older sister. "Why didn't you go with Mom?" she demanded. I told her how our sister was separated from me and our mom, and that she might not find our mom in this vast, moving crowd. Serena and I were later herded into a bathhouse where we were shaved, processed, disinfected, and handed prison clothes. We were then directed to a barrack with about 200 other women. We still didn't know where we were. We asked, "When are we going to see our families?" The women who had been there before pointed to a chimney and said, "Do you see the smoke? That's where your family is." I thought, why would anyone say such things to us? We soon learned that they were telling the truth. In a few days, by sheer luck, we discovered my mother's two sisters in a nearby barrack. Their loving devotion to us helped protect and shield us in this hostile and frightening place. After a few weeks, numbers were tattooed on our arms. This seemed like a good sign. This would mean that they were keeping track of us. We were sent to work near the crematoriums and gas chambers at a storage and processing area where we sorted through mountains of belongings brought by the people arriving on the many transports. There were shoes and eyeglasses and toothbrushes and baby carriages and suitcases and pots and pans and every imaginable household item, all dumped in this place to be sorted, categorized, and sent back to Germany. Every morning we were made to line up for inspection. Each lineup was another selection to find the weak and the sick and any children who had been missed before. I remember trying to stand on a rock so that I would seem a little taller and older than my 13 years, and pinched my cheeks so I would look a little healthier. Because we worked and lived next to the crematorium and gas chamber, we soon had first-hand knowledge of what had happened to our families. Day and night, columns of men, women, older people, young mothers with children, en route to their deaths, passed our barrack. We watched them enter the gate that led to the gas chambers. Sometimes they called out to us. By that point, nothing could save them. The sounds were magnified when I worked the night shift. First, I would hear the hissing of the steam engine arriving at the platform and the whistle of the train. Within a half hour, hundreds of women, children, and elderly would pass by our barrack and disappear into the gas chamber. The people arriving at night saw the smoke and the flames belching from the chimneys and the burning of bodies in open pits. It looked to them like they were being herded into open flames. Their shrieks and prayers were soon followed by silence. Day and night, the transports kept coming. Even though the Germans were losing the war and they were rushing to finish the final solution, the 5 gas chambers and crematoriums operated day and night to keep up with the extermination of the largest number of Jews remaining in occupied Europe. Between May and June 1944, 338,000 Jewish people were deported from Hungary to Auschwitz. At the height of the killing, as many as 10,000 people were killed every 24 hours. In the late fall of 1944, as the Russian front approached, the Germans blew up the killing facilities. Then in January 45, they evacuated the camp and took the remaining prisoners on a death march. Over 58,000 Auschwitz prisoners were forced to march hundreds of miles in the January winter further into Germany. This was another way of diminishing our numbers. Anyone who fell from exhaustion or sat down to rest was shot. We ended up in concentration camps deep in Germany, where by this time my sister, my aunts, and I were sick and emaciated. My sister was among those selected for death. When I realized that we were about to be separated, I said, "I am her sister." And I was told, "Well, you can go too." They put us with other selected women into a room to await a truck to take us to a killing area. But perhaps because of the approaching Russian front and the resulting chaos, the truck never arrived. Soon after, the guards fled and the remaining survivors drifted out of the camp. After some time, we made our way to Prague and found a few relatives, all young adults under the age of 30, who had survived. From my immediate family of parents and 6 children, only Serena and I survived. All 13 of the children of the extended family were killed, as well as my grandparents. So looking back on this history today, with a perspective of over 70 years, I find myself with no answers, only questions, such as, what is man's true nature? Is he good or is he bad? Can we rely on his laws? And what lies just below the surface of civilization? After living in their country for several generations, my family suddenly found itself outside the protection of any law, fair game to be robbed, rounded up, deported, and finally murdered. How did all this happen? As I said, I don't have any answers, but I urge you to be on guard against propaganda that seeks to divide people and to blame certain groups for all our problems. Thank you so much for listening to me. I will be glad to answer any questions. We will see some pictures overhead. These pictures were taken by Nazi soldiers assigned to photograph transports coming from Hungary in all aspects of their arrival: separation, segregation, the processing. And in one of these pictures, I find myself as on the platform just after I was separated from my family. This is the entrance to the gate to Auschwitz. The trains would come through this gate. Okay. All right. Here you see people who have gotten out of the train. On one side, the men are lined up. On the other side, the last part of the women who came out of this, women and children who came out of this train. I am in this corner right here, wearing a kerchief on my head and a big coat, standing there, looking in the direction where my sister went, and hoping to see whether she caught up with Mom. In this corner, probably were my mother and family, who are now been separated and went in the direction they were sent. Up there on the top, you see a large column of people. Those are the women, children, and elderly who came off this train and been separated, and they are on the way to the gas chambers. This is how it went. The largest number of each transport were picked out to be killed because, since children were not to live in this place, since this was genocide, the children with their mothers and the elderly were separated right away, and within a half hour they were dead. these two pictures show the trains, the cattle cars being emptied. The lower picture shows you people getting out of the cars and with their bundles, and which will be collected. In the top picture, you see several SS supervising the exit and making people go towards the front where more SS will wait for them to do the separation. It was very efficiently done, very fast. They didn't take a lot of time to make sure who was who, or very often young adults were sent to their deaths, and somewhat older people sent towards the living. But there were more separations later on, so it wasn't as critical at this point. Here are women who have already been, their hair was shaved and processed, although further processing will be done when they will receive their prison, one-size-fits-all prison clothes. This is how the barracks looked inside, with the people on these levels. Getting off during the day needed special permission. This is unusual that people are sitting outside of their bunks, because usually you couldn't get off except with special permission to go to the bathroom certain times of the day. Here are children who are showing their tattoos. The children, twins, identical twins, were separated at their arrival because medical experiments were done on twins in Auschwitz. There was a medical team headed by a Nazi doctor, and they did experiments on large numbers of children, live experiments, very cruel and horrendous disfigurements, and eventually the children were killed. Now this is the area where I worked, where all the belongings from the train were dumped, and about 1,000 of us women were sorting them out, first to bring everything indoors out of the elements, and after that, for months, we were day and night sorting them out and labeling them for shipment indoors. This shows shoes from the various transports, and as you can see, the shoes are as tall, as high as the roof of the barrack. And this is not unusual. Everything that was brought from the trains were mountains high, and we just worked day and night to sort it out and to be sent back to Germany. Here again, the shoes. As you can see, this represents thousands of people, and the shoes were from baby shoes to boots to every kind of shoe, and the same with eyeglasses and other personal items that gave you the idea of how many people represented these things. So this is the same processing place indoors. Once we brought them in out of the weather, we continued to sort them. And this went on for 8 months until we were evacuated when the Russian war, the Russian army approached Auschwitz. Now this picture is exceptionally painful and sad because, as I was telling you earlier, we watched women and children walking into the gate of the gas chambers. But because the Hungarian transports were coming day and night, the killing facility was backed up. Often the people had to wait their turn outside a wooded area. At this point, they have no idea of where they're going and what's happening to them. But the pictures that were taken by the Nazi soldier includes even this area of people waiting for their death. So when I was aware that these pictures are available, looking through them with a magnifying glass, I found myself, and then later I found my two little brothers and my mother sitting there among the other women and children waiting their turn to enter the gas chambers. So these lower two little boys together are my two little brothers, and my mother's profile, just mainly her head, is behind the little boy. So I found this, although I knew that this was their fate, to see it like this is something that I surely can never forget. Now, people often ask, did anybody try to escape? You see the electrified fences. Auschwitz was a very large camp with many sub-camps within it. Each sub-camp had this kind of electrified fencing. Of course, there were also guard towers, and there was no way to escape. Okay, well, this gives you an idea of how Auschwitz looked, what it was like to arrive there, and the sad end that most people who came there experienced.
Okay, hey guys, you guys just listened to a truly powerful presentation. Take a minute, think about any questions that you might have based on the presentation, or anything you learned about in history, or if you're currently reading night or already read it, anything that you want to ask. Don't be bashful. This is a great opportunity. It's once in a lifetime. So if you have a question, come on up and ask it.
So I would like to ask you, what are some common misconceptions about the Holocaust?
Not sure. I heard. Say it again, please.
What are some common misconceptions about the Holocaust?
Misconceptions?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, I don't think people can understand how such a facility could even have existed, built for the purpose of killing and scientifically planned as to how many can be killed in a given 24 hours. I don't think that one can even imagine that such a thing could exist. I mean, that would be the greatest. I didn't know, we didn't know that such a thing is possible, that you bring in trains full of civilians, women and children, for the purpose of killing them, who are unarmed and guilty of nothing. So this has to be processed as an idea that this is possible.
Do you still keep your Jewish faith?
Well, yes, very much so. I belong to a group of Jewish people who have been badly treated through the generations. I feel that they were totally innocent of the kind of lies and accusations, to the point where it led to the idea of eliminating them altogether. And all the more reason for me to feel that we should maintain our faith, and our group should be cohesive.
It's a great honor to meet you.
Yeah.
It's a great honor to meet you.
Well, thank you. Go ahead over there.
What was it like seeing the crematoriums firsthand?
Well, when seeing it from the train platform, we could already see it from a distance. Well, that was still, people were not prepared to see what it was. We didn't react to it properly. But then when we worked immediately next to it, the very shocking thing about it was that since it was constantly being fed, not only smoke came out of it, but actually flames, very high flames, which we saw it but couldn't believe it. I think one of the things about seeing it, knowing it, and yet not allowing it to penetrate was with us for a very long time. There was some kind of, in our human nature, I think, that you can't accept something so shocking and internalize it and make it real. So to see flames, you see crowds of women and children, infants, toddlers, older people, to walk in there and see flames many feet high. Well, we saw it, but kept it at some kind of a distance to be able to survive.
Thank you very much.
Did you ever think about like revenge right after you escaped?
Well, it's an amazing thing to me, up to this day, that as a group of survivors, there was no revenge at all. We were so beaten down and so exhausted. All we wanted to do is get out of there. I've heard of very few individual revenge when someone would recognize some Nazi who they knew was so guilty of such terrible crimes that people would take revenge. But there was no group organization or group plan for revenge.
Have you ever returned to Germany?
Have I returned to Germany? I have returned to Auschwitz with my children. And although I was told by many people, why would you want to go back there? I felt it was a very important thing for me to do for many reasons. First of all, even though my whole family was killed there, we don't have a burial site to go. That was their burial site, so to speak. And in addition to that, when I was there, I had no idea where this place was on the map. And, you know, since I was so young yet, I kind of thought that this was on another planet, because what was going on there, a factory of killing, was not on this earth. And I was convinced no one knows about it, and I needed to see where it was on the map, how it looked, what was around it. And of course, it was somewhat very disappointing actually to see that just outside this huge camp was a town called Auschwitz, and it was a perfectly normal town with houses and gardens and churches, and life was quite normal, and it was indeed on this planet.
After you were liberated, and oh, sorry, go ahead. Sorry, go.
How do you think this experience has affected you personally? Do you think you are a better person out of this because you can empathize and feel more for other human beings? Or do you think this has turned you a bit cold and dark on the inside?
Big question. How did it affect me? Well, I'm not the same person that I am had I not been through this. What I witnessed had a profound effect on my perception of human nature. And how is it that civilization can deteriorate so quickly and so completely? That I'm particularly troubled by the fact that this very high level of civilization that Germany had could revert to barbarism, and that they were able and willing to kill children. Something like 1 million children were killed in Auschwitz. That really boggles the mind, because if you want to assign guilt to adults, you still don't assign guilt to little children. So human nature and how it is so fickle and so unreliable has made me very cautious, but not so pessimistic that that I'm angry for the rest of my life at everyone. I'm hoping that people learn from this. I'm hoping that we evolve to a higher level. But I am not the same. There is my personal loss. There is sort of a permanent scar somewhere that will never really, go away.
Once you were free, where did you go? Did you go home to where you had been taken from?
Good question. Well, we wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. There was no transportation. Germany was pretty well destroyed. No train, no bus. We actually started walking on the highways and listening to rumors about if you go this way, there'll be a bus. If you go that way, somebody says there are some cars. But none of that was true. We spent probably a month wandering on highways towards a direction which people rumor had it there would be transportation. So eventually, there was a bus that was sent from Czechoslovakia to pick up survivors, Czech survivors. And eventually, we did get on that bus and ended up in Prague. But Prague was very far from our hometown. We were not from that part of Czechoslovakia. Nobody wanted to go back home because we knew we would find empty homes. And all survivors were able to meet through word of mouth, lists that were put out on walls. And so within days, we knew who survived and who didn't. And so there was no reason for us to go back home. In fact, we wanted to leave Europe as fast as possible because we were badly treated and couldn't trust those people to go back and live next to them.
Thank you.
How did you keep up hope each day in the camp?
Well, it's hard to explain what we saw and what we understood, and yet didn't totally internalize. But we all knew one thing: we wanted to survive. We desperately wanted not to be one of those dead added to the numbers. There was a feeling, a desire to live, to get out of here and to live. So that sort of thing kept us going, the idea that we must survive. But it was very hard, of course, to go from one day to the next. Always mindful that the selections were always there, that you'll be picked out. I mean, we saw the selections. We saw our friends being picked out and disappear. So it was always making sure you live another day and hoping that this madness will be over and you'll survive.
When you were working in the clothing, sorting, and different things like that, were you able to get a hold of any extra commodities that maybe people wouldn't normally have access to,
Yes,
like extra
that's
shoes?
a good question.
Or anything like
That is very true, because there was so much. There were some, I remember some broken cookies. There was even some things like bags of sugar. I mean, whatever people were bringing and were still, on the trains. There were some things, and clothing. If there were shoes, that we could exchange our own shoes for other shoes. We were not supposed to do that, but with all that was going there, they couldn't keep track. So we did have some of that benefit, but the trade-off was what we saw daily of our people being destroyed firsthand, what was not seen by Auschwitz prisoners who were in other sub-camps. They heard about it, they might have seen the chimney, but they could always say, no, it's just rumors. We actually saw day and night. I would stand at the window of my barrack and see these columns of young mothers and young children and their older women slowly walking through that gate, and see the chimneys belching day and night when the Hungarian transports were coming, because that was the last large push of destruction of the Hungarian Jewish community. So I don't know, the trade-off was pretty great.
Thank you.
Impossible.
Were there any people or specific events that stood out to you while you were in the camp?
Any specific events?
Or people?
Yeah. Well, many. One enormous event was when The prisoners who worked in the gas chambers and crematoriums were all our own Jewish prisoners. The Nazis made all the dirty work, made our own prisoners do. And so the men who worked pulling out the dead were our own people. And these people were, every 3 months or so, they themselves would be killed because they could only do the work so long. And at one point, there were 5 different gas chambers and killing areas. These men who worked there attempted and worked on blowing up 2 of these facilities. And somehow they managed, through truck drivers who came in and out of the camp carrying goods, somehow they managed to acquire a few explosives. And on a given day, the signal was given, and they actually managed to detonate some of this, and one of the crematoriums was destroyed. Gas chambers, actually. And when that happened, we heard, the women's camp was just a electrified fence away from this. And we were working in these barracks when we heard this huge explosion. And immediately there were men rushing into our barracks, and the Nazi soldiers with dogs following them and pulling out the people, and then we heard shots. So we knew something terrible was happening. And when the situation died down that same day, we were marched out into an open area, and this Nazi commander gave us a long and threatening lecture on how we, the women, must have been in on this too, and that because of this terrible thing we did in collaboration with the men, we are all finished, and we will be punished, and we will be killed, and we're just, and we thought that, of course, yes, that definitely is going to happen. But for some reason, when they got involved with the damage done there and their own problems with it, that sort of forgot about our, I don't know if the women in our area contributed to it in any way. I doubt it, but the punishment didn't come through, but we were terribly frightened. Both happy that these men pulled some of this off, because they were all killed, the men were all killed. And the whole, apparently, their attempt was only partially successful because of some technical things that didn't work for them, that they only managed to do some damage to one, but that facility was put out of commission. It was never used again.
Thank you.
How did it feel once you were free to know that you survived something so tragic and unworldly?
Well, there were very mixed feelings, because we knew we had no one to come home to. We understood that the terrible loss, the terrible killing that went on. But at the same time, we thought that we had a message to give to the outside world, that look what was going on here. I mean, this is going to put an end to anti-Semitism for one thing, and just hate against each other. That if this is not a lesson, then nothing will. So we will look forward to a new era, even though our losses were so devastating.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, that's a good question too. We definitely thought we would be with our families. And when all of a sudden we found ourselves being separated in many parts and torn apart, we still thought that this was a work camp of some kind, and that women and children and older people will be separate and not working, and that the young people that they separated would do the work, and of course we would get together sometime, maybe not every day, but surely we would see each other. Why would we not think that way, coming from normal civilized life? And so we immediately asked those who had come before us over there, when are we going to meet our families? It never occurred to us that anything else would happen.
Was it challenging for you to go through with it, or like recovering from that devastating time?
How was it recovering?
Was it harder for you to recover from it, or going actually through it?
It was very complex coming out of there. Going through it was a nightmare. Like I never thought I was on this earth. I mean, I've given you just a little idea of what it's like with the lawlessness brought to the ultimate, where the Nazi soldiers assigned to the camps were gods. They were in charge of your life and death, without any due process, without any accusation, without any rhyme or reason, and so you can't absorb that. You just can't deal with it. And so coming out, we had that to process, plus the fact that we had no homes and families to go back to. The adjustment was very difficult. We were also in bad physical shape, so then having to recover. There were lots of people with many ailments, all kinds of problems, so there was that. It was a combination. It wasn't like, people always think that when the gates opened there was huge celebration. No, we were emaciated, we were sick, we were heart sick, we were not joyous. We just sort of left the place and wandered the highways. And again, nobody fed us on the way, and we had to fend for ourselves. We happened to be liberated by the Russian army, who in some places, I understand, they provided care for these people that they liberated. In our particular place, they didn't. And so we were sort of left still unattended, sick, hungry, looking for transportation.
Do you think that the Nazi soldiers that worked at the concentration camps knew what type of evil they were committing?
They were doing it so easily. It was a day's work. They looted a lot of the stuff that came off the trains. It was a choice assignment to be there. They employed some of the Jewish slave laborers in their homes. They went home. The commander of Auschwitz had a huge house just adjacent to the camp with his wife and children. He went home every day to his wife and children. The other Nazi soldiers who were assigned to the camp went home on leave. They must have talked about it, came back and proceeded with killing the children. I can't give you any better answers as to what a system. what a horrendous breakdown of civilization was going on.
What great questions, everybody. Does anybody have any other questions while we're at it here? You want to come on down? You have another question? All right, go ahead.
How were your children affected by you being a Holocaust survivor?
Mm-hmm. Good question. I have my son here. I have 3 children, grown children, and 4 grandchildren. I married young, and when my first son was born, I was 20. And I thought about it carefully as to what my role will be as a parent. I decided that he will have faith in people, and my huge disappointment in mankind will not be transmitted to him, because I felt he had a new chance, a new life. And in fact, I naively thought that if I make him very attractive by always keeping him nicely dressed and clean, and when I go to the park and with him in a carriage, and if people look at him and then say the usual normal things, oh, what a cute kid, and as this proceeds, he will get good feelings from people, so that he will know that people are friendly and safe. And I actually carried that through quite a long time, that he should have good feedback from people and have confidence in people. He shouldn't have the kind of pessimism, the kind of reality that I had about people. And so I carried that through. I think if you were to talk to my children, they feel that I told them the story as it was age appropriate, but that I tried very hard to keep a normal relationship with them and as how they viewed society. Did the best I could.
I actually have 2 questions. How long were you at Auschwitz?
I was in Auschwitz for 8 months, and then for 5 more months at several other camps after they evacuated us from Auschwitz.
And did you ever have the chance to meet Elie Wiesel?
No, actually, I met him in a crowd where he was the speaker, yes. He comes from the Romanian side of what was still Hungarian population, and I came from Czechoslovakian side of was Hungarian population. He was a couple of years older than I.
When you were in the camp, did you ever have like a special language that you would speak, like using your knowledge of Hebrew to kind of fool the guards, or try to have any secret conversations?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, I did speak Yiddish, and a lot of the other prisoners spoke Yiddish, but not all. And I understand that people who didn't speak German or Yiddish, like the Greeks or others who came from other parts of Europe, had a very hard time an extraordinary hard time in Auschwitz, because they couldn't understand the German commands and would be punished when they didn't react to what they were told to do. But we were lucky enough to be able to communicate with several languages.
What were the conditions like in the barracks where you were?
In the
Like where you stayed?
in the barracks.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. Well, at, after we first arrived, it was the kind of bunks and things that you saw in the picture. Very crowded the first few weeks and months. It was still cold, the nights were cold, there was one blanket for everyone on that bunk. You couldn't stretch out, leaning on people. Nobody liked it. Nobody slept at night. It was very scary. Rules about not stepping off. And then in the daytime, they would throw us out into the unpaved areas and sitting in the mud. They locked the door, they wouldn't let you in. It was very regimented, when you get in, when you get out, when you get the soup, and all that. It was just so, very cruel. People were upset and not kind. Everybody was angry, and it was just very scary. And that's when my mother's sisters, who were in their mid-20s, they were young themselves, but they treated me and my sister as children, because we were their sister's children. And so that helped me a tremendous amount to have had them, because I could lean on them at night. I could pull the blanket closer to me, and they would give me a hug, and they would remind me that I was the person I always was, So, but it was very harsh conditions for everyone.
Did you ever hear of anyone trying to plot a rebellion or anything? Would you have tried to rebel if you could have?
Well, as I was saying, the only rebellion was these people who worked in these gas chambers and crematoriums. Those were our prisoners. And they succeeded to some extent. But you must realize that we were unarmed civilians, surrounded by heavily armed people and dogs and electrified fences, and there was just no way. We were totally trapped, heavily guarded, so anyone who would even approach a Nazi to speak to them would be knocked down, or the dog would be let on them. We were just subhuman people to them. We were not people to them. So that made it easy for them to treat us in the way they did.
Did you create any friends or lifelong friends at the camp?
Well, there were other teenagers there who slipped by the selection process. There was one particular girl from another part of Hungary that I used to talk to. We chatted, and strangely, it wasn't always about our current condition. We talked about school and other things, and for a while kept in touch. But I do know people who were there, and keep in touch with them if they survived. Kept in touch with them later. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you to Ms. Weiss for taking the time out of your day today. I also wanted to thank the sound crew in the back. You guys did a great job with some of our technical difficulties.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you very much. You were a wonderful audience, and your questions were really great. Thank you very much.
Ms. Weiss, for taking the time out of your schedule, W.T. Woodson and the sophomore class would like to present you with a couple tokens of appreciation from us. So thank you again.
Thank you. Oh, my goodness. Thank you. Beautiful. Oh, my. That's great. Thank you. Beautiful.
All right, sophomore class, you guys are a class act. Thank you very much for attending today. Please report to your fourth period return.